They said he wouldn't live past the year, so they gave him a wife, not out of love, but to give him someone to die beside. She didn't cry, she didn't run. She married him with empty eyes and a heart full of questions. But what she did next, no one, not even his own family, could have seen it coming. He had never worn a wedding dress before, not even during childhood games or teenage fantasies. But there she stood now, stiff in a cream gown that looked more like a costume than a promise. The registrar's office smelled of fresh air freshener and formalities, and the silence between her and the man in the wheelchair was thicker than the legal papers on the decks. His name was Ahana, her new husband, 31 years old, dying and barely able to lift his head. Vivian was 24, perfectly healthy, and very aware that none of this was about love. The ceremony lasted 10 minutes. There was no rings, no vow, no kiss, just signatures. His mother, Mrs. Ella, thanked her with a trembling voice and eyes that refused to meet hers. You've done a good job, she said. You've given him dignity. But Vivian wasn't sure if that was true or if she's just signed up to be a witness to death. The ride to the house was silent. Vivian sat in the back seat beside Hannah's wheelchair, folded and still. Ella drove, her hands tight around the steering wheels, and the car moved like it was trying not to disturb the air. The mansion they arrived at was far too big for three people. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, a grand piano no one touched. Everything inside screamed wealth, yet nothing felt alive. Vivian was shown to the guest room across the hall from Hannah's. This is just formality, Ella said with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. No one expects anything from you. Just be kind to him. Keep him company, that's all. Vivian nodded. She hadn't asked for this arrangement. She had debts, an eviction notice, and a mother in a care home. When a stranger offered to settle it all in exchange for a paper marriage to a dying heir, it didn't feel like a choice. It felt like survivor. Vivian heard him before she saw him again. A soft, dry cough echoed down the hall in the dead of night. She stepped out of her room barefoot and saw the faintest lights spilling from under Anna's door. For a moment, she debated walking away, but something made her knock gently. No answer. She pushed the door open slowly. He was awake, staring at the ceiling, eyes dull but focused. For a dying man, he looked oddly aware. She stood at the door, unsure if she could speak. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came. He blinked once, and his gaze shifted, locking directly with hers. It was the first time she truly saw him, pale skin, sunken cheeks, dark circles under his eyes, but behind all, he was young, not old, not gone, alive in a body that seemed to be giving up on him. She said nothing, neither did he. She only nodded and left the door half open and she walked away. But she felt his eyes followed her long after she returned to bed. The next morning, Vivian found a full breakfast laid out on the dining table. Steaming eggs, toast, fresh juice, and cut fruit arranged with care. But no one was seated. The housekeeper nodded at her silently and disappeared. Ella walked in moments later, perfectly dressed as if she stepped out of a magazine shoot. He doesn't eat with others, she said, pouring herself coffee. Too tired. You can eat alone or wait until he's done. Vivian sat down awkwardly, unsure if she was even supposed to enjoy the food. As she lifted her fork, she heard the hum of Ahana's electric wheelchair moving through the hallway. He passed the dining room without glancing in, but just before he disappeared around the corner, he paused briefly and turned his head. Their eyes met again just for a second. It wasn't emotions she saw, it was recognition. For the first time, Vivian realized something quietly uncertain. He was watching her more than he let on. That afternoon, Ella called Vivian into the study. The room smelled of polished wood and expensive silence. A thick envelope sat on the desk beside them. This is your allowance monthly as agreed. Ella said, sliding it forward. If you remain respectful, maintain the home environment, and avoid complications, we won't have any issues. Her tone was firm, almost rehearsed. Vivian nodded, fingers resting on the envelope but not opening it. What kind of complications? She asked. Ella's eyes narrowed slightly. You're not his nurse, Vivian. You are not his wife in the traditional sense either. There is no need for emotional entanglement. Ahana is delicate. We simply want him to be comfortable, not confused. It was clear they didn't want her to love him. They didn't want him to hope. Vivian rose quietly, left the envelope untouched, and stepped out of the room. She wasn't sure what hurt more, that they didn't expect her to care or that part of her was starting to. The sky turned grey that evening as the first drops of rain tapped against the wide windows. Vivian bought a cup of coffee to Hannah's room unasked. He didn't speak, but he didn't push it away either. She set it down gently on the side table and turned to leave when she heard it. A soft sound. She almost missed it, a chuckle. She turned around and Hannah was looking at the cup. His lips curved ever so slightly, not a full smile, just a ghost one. But it was enough to stop her in her tracks. You think it's funny, she said quietly. He nodded barely, just once. Then he whispered, voice hurt and unused. You didn't poison it, right? It was a joke, a dark one, but it was a sentence, the first sentence. Vivian stared at him, half in shock, half in disbelief, and then she smiled too. For the first time since she arrived in the house, something felt alive. The next morning, Vivian woke up with a strange feeling in her chest, one she hadn't seen in weeks, curiosity. She carried Hannah's tea to his room again. This time, he was awake before she knocked. You're early, he rasped, his voice clearer than yesterday. She stepped in and set the tray down. You're getting better at sounding human, she replied. He let out a low breath. As she arranged the books on the shelf, she noticed one that looked out of place, older, worn and tucked behind a roll of untouched hardcover. She pulled it out, a photo album. Ahana stiffened. Don't open that, he said, tone low but serious. It was the first time she heard authority in his voice. She nodded and put it back without a word, but now she knew there were stories in that house no one had told her. Not yet. Vivian noticed it on her third week in the house. There was no nurse, no medical profession came to check on Ahan, and no doctor visited, no therapist stopped by. For someone who was supposed to be dying, he had no one monitoring his condition but a few pills and silence. That afternoon, as she handed him a new book to read, she asked gently, why don't you have a nurse? Ahana hesitated. His fingers tightened slightly around the book. Because I fired them all, he said. They made me feel like a patient. I just wanted to be a person again. Vivian said nothing. She wouldn't argue with that, but something still didn't sit right. If he was as sick as he claimed, shouldn't someone have insisted on proper care? Later that day, she walked past Ella's study and overheard part of a phone call. He's stable. No, there's been no change. And no, he doesn't need anyone else. We're handling it. Her tone was clipped, dismissive, controlling. Vivian stood in the hallway, heart thudding. For the first time, she began to wonder what if Ahana wasn't dying? What if they had just wanted him to? Vivian needed air. She stepped outside for the first time in days, drawn by the quiet elegance of the garden behind the house. Manicured hedges, a koi pond, and a winding stone path. It was beautiful, yet unnervingly perfect. As she sat on a bench beneath a willow tree, she saw him, Ahana, in his wheelchair, alone, slowly navigating the path from the other end of the garden. She hadn't been told he ever left the house. He looked stronger, not healed, but definitely more alive than he had been that first day. He paused when he saw her, unsure if he should continue. Then, with a small shrug, he rolled forward. They sat in silence for several minutes. Eventually, he broke it. You've come out here often. She smiled faintly. First time. He nodded, eyes scanning the pond. It used to be my favorite place before I got sick. Before the silence swallowing everything, his voice cracked, but he didn't apologize. She didn't pity him either. Instead, she whispered, then maybe it's time to talk louder than the silence. And for the first time, Ahana looked at her. Not just glanced, but truly looked. And something in his expression softened. That evening, Vivian found the pill organizer on Ahana's nightstand, almost untouched. Days marked, pills still in their compartment. She stared at it confused. You haven't been taking this, she said gently. Ahana didn't deny it. They make me sicker, he said simply. They always did. She picked up the small prescription bottle, reading the label, expired months ago. Her brows furrowed. These are supposed to help you, Hannah, not poison you. He leaned back against the headboard. I stopped trusting doctors when they stopped looking me in the eyes. Everyone just accepted I was dying. No one ever asked if I agreed. Vivian said nothing, but her thoughts raced. If the pills weren't helping, and he was improving without them. What was really going on here? Later that night, she searched drawers in the guest room where she stayed and found a locked folder labeled Living Will MC. It wasn't hers. It must have been placed there by mistake or not. Vivian stared at the folder long before midnight. Living Will. AC. She knew she shouldn't open it, but something about finding it in her room felt intentional. With shaking hands, she peeled it open. Inside were documents, some typed, some handwritten. The top page was a declaration. Ahanas willingly agreed to palliative care at home, refusing all further treatment. It was signed, dated, witnessed by his mother. But the second page was different. It was a letter dated 6 months earlier, written by Ahana himself, but with a very different tone. I'm not ready to give up, it said. I need help, real help. I think I'm getting worse because of the house, not the illness. Something is off, please. If anything happens to me, don't believe the story they tell. Vivian sat back, her heart racing. It was all wrong. The paperwork, the pills, the quiet isolation. It wasn't care, it was control, and now she was part of it. The next morning, Vivian walked into the kitchen where Ella was sipping her usual black coffee for once. Vivian didn't wait to be addressed. Why wasn't Hannah's living way in my room? She asked. Ella didn't even flinch. I placed it there, she said. I wanted you to understand your place in this. You are not his savior, Vivian. You're just his comfort. Vivian's jaw tightened. He wrote a letter. He doesn't want to die. Ella's eyes darkened. That letter was written in a moment of weakness. You don't know the moments of suffering that came after it. You don't know the pain, the confusion. He begged us to end the hospital visit. The will is legal, final. But he's getting better. Vivian's voice was low but firm. And that's not what you want, is it? Ella stood slowly, her heels clicking against the marble floor. You were prayed to keep him calm, quiet, not to give him hope. Hope is dangerous there. Hope delays closure. She walked away, leaving Vivian trembling. For the first time, she realized she hadn't been hired to be a wife. She had been hired to help bury him. Vivian waited until late that night. Anna was half asleep when she entered his room. She closed the door gently, then pulled the chair beside his bed. I read your letter, she whispered. His eyes fluttered open. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. She saw the flicker of fear, then relief in them. I believe you, she said. Ahana nodded weakly. They don't want me alive, he murmured. They want closure, an inheritance split, and a memory polished enough to be mourned. He paused, breathing shallow. But I'm still here, I'm still fighting. Vivian leaned forward. Then let's fight properly. You need real help, real doctors. You need out of this house. For the first time, Hannah looked alive, really alive. They'll never let me leave, he said. Then we don't act, she replied. We plan, we disappear. That night they whispered under a blanket of shadows, laying the first stones of their first secret escape. The sick man wasn't ready to die, and the girl forced to marry him. She was about to become the reason he lived. It was raining again, not the soft kind, but heavy, angry drops that struck the windows like fists. Ella was out for a meeting, the housekeeper conveniently absent. Vivian stood by Hannah's side as he gripped the metal arm of his wheelchair, teeth clenched. Are you sure? She asked softly. He didn't answer, he just pushed. He was shaky, unsteady, painful to watch, but he rose. For the first time in nearly a year, Hannah stood on his own feet. Vivian rushed forward to steady him, but he lifted a hand, stopping her. I need to do it, he said, through gritted teeth. He stood one step, then another. By the time he reached the window, he was shaking, but he was standing, alive, defiant. Tears spilled from Vivian's eyes. You're not dying, she whispered. You're not even close. Behind them, the security camera blinked red, recording. Ella returned home just before sunset. The housekeeper scurried ahead of her as always, and Vivian pretended nothing has changed. But later that evening, Ella summoned her to the living room. The screen on the wall was paused mid-frame, and Hannah standing at the window, caught, documented, and paused like a threat. Ella didn't speak for a while. She just stared at the screen with a stony expression. Then finally she said, So, he works now. Her voice was flat, her tone unreadable. Vivian stayed quiet. I underestimated you, Ella said, turning slowly. I thought you'd be quiet, grateful, but you stirred something that was meant to settle. That's dangerous, Vivian. Vivian stood tall. What's dangerous is pretending he's still dying when he's not. Ella smiled, then she said, Be warned and beware. That night, Vivian didn't sleep, and neither did Hannah, because now the game had changed and the house became had declared war. Vivian spent the next 2 days quietly preparing. She ordered supplies under a fake account, medical files, burner phone, prepaid ride shares. She knew Ella had eyes everywhere, so she kept her movements subtle. Hannah, meanwhile, continued to stand and walk in small bursts, regaining strength little by little, but always behind closed doors. One evening, Vivian mapped out the plans he whispered behind his bed. We'll leave next Wednesday. I booked a clinic out of town, private. No question, they can run real tests. You'll be safe. Hannah smiled faintly. Safe? I forgot what that word feels like. Suddenly, a soft creak interrupted them. A shadow passed the hallway. Vivian shut up and peeked through the door.